It began with a single piece of paper, yellowed, fragile, and soaked in silence. What it revealed would unravel a secret the South tried to forget. This image you are looking at might seem like just an old photograph of a child sitting neatly in a Victorian chair. But if you look a little closer, if you really pay attention to the small details that most people prefer not to see, you'll start to notice something deeply unsettling. The child's eyes never opened again to see the light of day. This isn't a normal family portrait from the 19th century. It is one of the strangest and most haunting post-mortem photographs ever taken, and the story behind it goes far beyond anything written in photography books or museum records. In late 1887, inside a large Victorian mansion on the edge of Boston, a heartbroken mother held the still body of her 8-year-old son. That winter had been especially harsh, and diphtheria had already taken the lives of dozens of children in the area. But for Helena Morrison, the death of her only child was more than a tragedy. It was the destruction of everything she loved. It meant the end of her family line, the loss of carefully built dreams, and the start of an obsession that would push her past the limits of reason, society, and even death itself. Post-mortem photography wasn't unusual during the 19th century. In fact, it was seen as a sacred custom for grieving families. In an era when child deaths were common and photography was rare and expensive, the only picture a family might ever have of a loved one was taken after they had already passed away. Photographers who worked in this strange art developed skilled techniques to create the illusion of life, posing bodies naturally, painting open eyes over closed lids, or using hidden metal stands to hold the dead upright as if peacefully asleep. But Helena Morrison's case was different, completely different. The photograph born of her obsession would later become one of the greatest mysteries in Victorian photography, sparking decades of rumors, studies, and silent horror among those who dared to examine it closely. Helena was not an ordinary woman. She had been widowed for 3 years and had devoted her life to raising her son, James. Her husband had made a fortune trading spices with the Orient, leaving her with wealth and independence. She was also unusually educated for a woman of her time, having studied medicine and anatomy in Paris before marriage. That knowledge made her an object of suspicion among Boston's conservative society, but it would later play a key role in what she did next. When James became ill in December 1887, Helena refused to accept traditional medical advice. Using her scientific background, she tried experimental remedies, imported rare medicines from Europe, and sought the best doctors along the East Coast. Yet diphtheria in those days was nearly always fatal, and all her efforts and resources could not change fate. James died on a bitterly cold January morning in 1888 as snow fell outside his window. Helena sat beside him, clutching his small hand as his final breath escaped. The doctor pronounced death at 9:15 a.m. What happened after that would become one of the most chilling stories in post-mortem history. Helena refused to let anyone touch the body. She sent away the doctor, the servants, even the parish priest who had come to perform the last rites. She locked herself in the room with her son and stayed there for nearly 24 hours. Those outside assumed she was grieving in silence, lost in shock and denial. They had no idea what was really taking place behind the locked door. When she finally stepped out, there was something different in her expression. The grief was still there, but it had hardened into a cold, focused determination. She had made up her mind. She would not settle for a simple memorial photograph. She wanted something far greater, something that would challenge death itself. Helena had studied not only anatomy and physiology in Paris, but also more secretive practices. During her studies, she met doctors who worked with advanced preservation methods, men who explored the thin boundary between medicine and forbidden science. They taught her about ways to preserve the human body that went far beyond ordinary embalming, methods that could make a person look almost alive for an astonishing length of time. So Helena made her choice. She would hire the best post-mortem photographer in New England, but before that, she would use her knowledge to preserve James's body so perfectly that it would allow for something more than a photo. It would be an image that captured the very spirit of his life. The photographer she chose was Augustus Peyton, a man famous across the region for his remarkable post-mortem portraits. Peyton's work was considered almost magical for its time. His photographs were so lifelike that families often said it felt like their loved ones were simply asleep. When Helena approached Peyton, she didn't just ask for a standard session. She offered him a shocking sum of money, more than his entire year's income, but with one unusual condition. He had to work only for her for 2 weeks and follow her exact instructions. Peyton, though a talented artist, was also a practical man. The offer was too tempting, especially during a slow winter season. Believing she was just another grieving mother with the means to pay for the best, he accepted without hesitation. He could not have known what he was walking into. When Peyton arrived at the Morrison estate the next morning, he was stunned. The boy's bedroom no longer looked like a place of mourning. It looked like a medical laboratory. Strange equipment sat on tables, bottles filled with chemicals glimmered in the lamplight, and surgical tools lay neatly arranged. Helena explained that she had used special preservation methods she had learned in Europe. These, she claimed, would allow James to appear completely lifelike. The photography, however, had to be done in a specific order, under strict conditions that she outlined in great detail. James sat in a carved wooden chair, dressed in his finest clothes, his small hands resting naturally on the armrests. Peyton was amazed. The boy truly looked alive. His skin tone was soft and natural, his expression calm and peaceful. It was the most perfect preservation he had ever witnessed. But as he began setting up his camera, he started to notice things that made him uneasy. There was something odd about the eyes. Even closed, they seemed to carry an unnatural depth, as if something remained aware behind them. The light also behaved strangely on the boy's face. His hands, the tilt of his head, even the faint line of his lips, all seemed too real, too present. Helena oversaw every step of the process with unnerving precision. She measured the camera's distance, the angle of the light, the exact exposure time. Every adjustment was recorded carefully in her notebook. Peyton noticed that she also noted room temperature, the position of shadows, even small changes in her son's skin. It was far more than a mother's mourning ritual. It was a scientific experiment. By the 3rd hour, Peyton began to realize that what he was part of was far darker than he'd thought. Helena asked him to move James's hands, to tilt his head slightly, and each time Peyton saw tiny, subtle movements, muscle responses, slight reactions that no preserved body should make. It wasn't full motion, but something in the flesh seemed responsive. When he finally asked Helena about her preservation method, she avoided a direct answer. She simply said she had used a combination of medical science and techniques she had studied in France. But her eyes, sharp and feverish, suggested she was hiding more than she was revealing. The photo session lasted several more hours. Peyton took multiple exposures, each technically flawless. But as he developed the images, an eerie feeling grew stronger. In the photographs, James didn't look dead. He looked alive, peacefully sleeping, perhaps even breathing. But there was also something else, something that made Peyton's hands tremble. In every picture, James seemed to be aware, almost as if he were looking back through the camera lens, silently watching whoever dared to observe him. When the session ended, Peyton could barely hide his desire to leave the mansion. As he packed his camera, he avoided Helena's gaze. He didn't know what she had done to her son, or what he had just witnessed, but he knew one thing with chilling certainty. The boy in that chair, the one whose eyes were supposed to be forever closed, did not look entirely gone. There was something in the atmosphere, in Helena's sharp focus, in James's very presence that left Peyton deeply uneasy. He agreed to develop the photographs in his studio and deliver them to Helena within a week, as they had arranged. Yet the process of developing those photographs would turn out to be far more disturbing than the session itself. When Peyton began working with the photographic plates in the silent darkness of his lab, he noticed something that went beyond his technical understanding of photography. The first thing that struck him was the unusual sharpness of the images. Even with standard equipment and his usual techniques, James's photographs showed a level of detail and clarity that surpassed anything Peyton had ever produced. Every strand of hair, every pore of the skin, every fold in the fabric appeared with near supernatural precision. But it wasn't only about technical perfection. There were elements within the images that should not have existed, details Peyton was certain he hadn't seen during the photo session. In the main photograph, the one that would later be known simply as the boy, faint shadows and reflections suggested additional presences in the room, figures or shapes that had not been visible when the picture was taken. Even more unsettling was what had happened to James's expression. The serene stillness Peyton remembered had subtly shifted. His face now held something almost aware, something that hinted not at peace but at consciousness, an impossible quality for someone no longer living. Peyton tried to rationalize it all, telling himself it was just the stress of the situation and the unusual nature of photographing the dead. But once he completed the development process and saw the full set of images, he could no longer deny that he had captured something far beyond the limits of ordinary photography. The main image, the one Helena had specifically requested, showed James seated in the ornate chair, his hands resting on the carved arms in a pose that suggested calm dignity. Yet there was something in that image that produced deep discomfort in anyone who looked at it too long. Though James's eyes were closed, they seemed to hold a strange kind of awareness, a silent perception that could almost be felt. His hands, while carefully arranged, did not appear stiff like those of the dead. They seemed naturally relaxed, almost alive. And the quality of light in the photograph gave the illusion that James might open his eyes at any moment and gaze directly at the viewer. When Peyton finally delivered the photographs to Helena Morrison, she studied each one with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Her reaction only deepened Peyton's unease. She did not behave like a grieving mother receiving the last images of her son. Instead, she analyzed the photographs with cold, methodical focus, taking notes in a small leather-bound book. When she reached the main image, the one called the boy, Helena smiled for the first time since Peyton had met her. But it was not a smile of comfort or sorrow. It was the look of a scientist who has seen proof that her experiment succeeded exactly as planned. Helena paid Peyton the agreed sum and dismissed him, instructing him firmly never to discuss the details of the session with anyone. Peyton agreed immediately, eager to put the unsettling experience behind him. But the events that followed would make it impossible for him to ever forget what had happened inside the Morrison mansion. 3 days later, an unexpected visitor appeared at his studio. The man introduced himself as Dr. Harrison Wickham, the county coroner. He began asking questions about the work Peyton had done for Helena Morrison. At first, Peyton assumed it was a routine inquiry concerning James's death, but soon it became clear that the matter was far more complicated. Dr. Wickham explained that he had received an anonymous complaint claiming that Helena had engaged in irregular and possibly illegal practices concerning her son's body. The message gave no details, but suggested that an investigation was warranted. As part of it, Dr. Wickham asked to see any documents or materials related to Peyton's work for Helena. Peyton, trying to remain calm, described only the basics, that he had been hired to create post-mortem photographs of James Morrison, a perfectly legal and common practice of the time. Yet the coroner's questions grew increasingly specific. He wanted to know about the body's condition, the methods of preservation used, and other details that implied he already knew more than he was revealing. Then Dr. Wickham disclosed something that changed Peyton's understanding of everything he had witnessed at the mansion. According to the coroner, Helena Morrison had not merely used advanced embalming methods, she had been conducting illegal medical experiments, procedures unrecognized by accepted medicine. Even more alarming, Wickham had uncovered evidence linking her to certain French researchers notorious for their secret studies on the boundary between life and death. These scientists, shunned by the medical establishment, had been experimenting with chemical substances and techniques that were considered both unethical and dangerous. Wickham's investigation showed that in the months before James's death, Helena had imported strange medical instruments and chemical agents unrelated to normal treatment. They seemed instead to be connected to experimental preservation and possibly reanimation. When Peyton heard this, he finally grasped the horrific truth. Helena had not merely wanted to preserve her son for a lifelike memorial photograph. She had used him as a subject in forbidden experiments that sought to challenge the finality of death itself. The realization that he had unknowingly participated in something resembling corpse desecration filled Peyton with dread. But it was already too late. The photographs existed. They had been delivered to Helena, and now they were part of a mystery far darker than anyone could have imagined. Dr. Wickham asked Peyton to share anything else he knew about Helena or the strange circumstances of the photography. Peyton described the unusual condition of James's body, the unorthodox materials Helena had used, and the strange qualities of the resulting images. Yet even as he spoke, he knew he was only beginning to comprehend what he had seen. The coroner's investigation dragged on for several weeks. Peyton was summoned multiple times to provide more statements. But gradually, the inquiries slowed. Wickham eventually told him that, although there were signs of irregular conduct, there was not enough evidence for legal action. James's burial had been performed according to the law, and no specific statutes had been broken. More importantly, Helena Morrison had vanished. Just a week after Wickham's first visit, it was discovered that Helena had abruptly left Boston, informing no one of her destination. The Morrison estate was placed under the care of her lawyers, who were instructed to sell the property as quickly as possible. She had simply disappeared, taking with her every secret about her experiments. The only physical evidence that remained were the photographs Peyton had made. At first, he kept a set of copies only as documentation of his work, but as time passed, he began to notice something peculiar. The images seemed to exert an odd fascination on anyone who saw them. Visitors to his studio who caught a glimpse of the boy would ask questions, remarking on the extraordinary realism and the haunting sense of presence the picture conveyed. Over time, Peyton realized that these photographs provoked emotional responses far beyond what any normal image could. Some people felt an almost magnetic attraction to them, mixed with discomfort. Others claimed that the boy seemed on the verge of opening his eyes. Several spoke of vivid dreams after viewing the photographs, dreams where James appeared alive, attempting to communicate. A few even claimed to sense his presence while looking at the image, as though it reached beyond the limits of the physical world. Frightened by these accounts, Peyton eventually stopped showing the photographs to casual visitors. But word of the strange images spread through Boston's small community of photographers and scientists. Soon, visitors began arriving specifically to see the infamous post-mortem pictures. One of them was Dr. Samuel Rutherford, a respected Harvard physician known for his studies on unexplained neurological phenomena. Rutherford had heard rumors of photographs that caused measurable psychological reactions in those who viewed them. Intrigued, he approached Peyton with a proposal to study the images scientifically. When Rutherford first saw the photographs, his reaction was immediate and profound. He had seen hundreds of corpses and countless post-mortem portraits, but James Morrison's pictures were different. The preservation of the body hinted at techniques far ahead of their time. Even more curious, Rutherford experienced physical changes as he observed the images. His pulse quickened, his breathing altered, and he had the distinct feeling that someone in the photographs was watching him. These reactions mirrored reports from others who had seen the photos. Determined to understand, Rutherford asked Peyton's permission to conduct a detailed study using medical and psychological methods. Peyton, still troubled by his memories, agreed, hoping science could finally bring him peace. Rutherford's analysis began with a technical inspection under magnification. What he found defied belief. The photographic grain displayed patterns that could not have been produced with known 19th century materials. The images seemed to have absorbed multiple layers of visual data, as if they had captured not just the visible scene, but something beneath it, something invisible. The doctor recorded every discovery, creating a collection of notes that would later become one of the most controversial studies of the late Victorian era. His writings hinted at a fascination with the same forbidden frontiers that had consumed Helena Morrison. Even more astonishing were the results of his psychological tests. In a controlled study, volunteers were shown the photographs, while their physical and emotional responses were monitored. The data was remarkable. 83% of participants sensed a conscious presence coming from the image. 71% reported changes in their sense of time, and 57% described a feeling of silent communication with the boy. Nearly one-third later experienced recurring dreams featuring James Morrison as a living figure, often trying to reveal details about his death and his mother's experiments. Dr. Rutherford documented all of it with clinical precision. Yet over time, he began to realize that he was dealing with something that went beyond the boundaries of science. The photographs of James Morrison seemed to act as a bridge, linking the world of the living with something that human understanding was never meant to reach. During the third month of his research, Dr. Rutherford made a discovery that completely changed his understanding of the case. While studying the photographs under special lighting conditions, he noticed that some areas of the images seemed to reveal extra information when viewed from certain angles or under specific light levels. Using new spectral analysis techniques originally designed for astronomy, Dr. Rutherford found that the photographs contained hidden layers of data that were invisible to the naked eye. These hidden layers revealed details about the Morrison mansion that the camera should not have been able to capture, including faint shapes suggesting other presences in the room, figures that had not been physically there during the photo session. Even more astonishing, the spectral analysis showed that the photographs seemed to hold traces of events that had taken place at the Morrison mansion before James's death, as if the plates had somehow captured more than a single moment in time. They appeared to record several overlapping moments from different periods. This led Dr. Rutherford to a conclusion that went against both his medical training and his understanding of reality. The experimental techniques Helena Morrison had used on her son had not simply preserved James's body in a lifelike state. They had created conditions allowing part of his consciousness to remain active after death, and that strange state had been permanently captured within the photographs. The implications were deeply disturbing. If Rutherford was correct, the images of James Morrison were not just portraits of a deceased child. They were evidence of a post-mortem existence, artificially maintained through experimental medical practices that explored unknown scientific territory. Dr. Rutherford tried to find Helena Morrison to learn more about her methods, but his search confirmed that she had vanished completely. There were no records of her after she left Boston, and her old contacts in France could not say where she had gone. Her disappearance meant that the full truth behind her experiments with James would remain forever unknown. Yet the photographs themselves endured, undeniable proof that something extraordinary had taken place at the Morrison mansion. something that not only challenged the medical knowledge of the time, but also pushed against the limits of what humans understood about life, death, and consciousness. By the 4th month of his study, Dr. Rutherford began to notice troubling effects on himself. Long exposure to James Morrison's photographs seemed to affect his mental balance. He started having vivid dreams in which James appeared as a real, aware presence, not a memory or fantasy. The dreams often contained detailed information about James's life that Dr. Rutherford could not have known by any normal means. Even worse, the dreams began to feel more real than waking life. He started sensing that the line between reality and something beyond it was becoming blurred. Realizing the danger, Dr. Rutherford decided to end his investigation. Still, the material he had gathered over those 4 months stood as unprecedented scientific evidence of phenomena that could not be explained by logic. In his final report, Dr. Rutherford concluded that Helena Morrison had somehow achieved what official science considered impossible. She had created conditions that allowed a fragment of human consciousness to exist beyond physical death, and that this state had been permanently recorded in photographic form. He advised that the photographs be stored in a secure archive, accessible only to qualified researchers aware of the psychological risks of prolonged exposure. He warned that the images held properties potentially dangerous to observers, especially those prone to mental instability. Dr. Rutherford submitted his report to Harvard University, but it was never published. The findings were deemed too controversial and too risky for public release. The report was classified as restricted academic material, available only to a few selected researchers. Peyton, already shaken by his role in the events, followed Rutherford's advice and kept James Morrison's photographs in a private archive. He stopped showing them to visitors and eventually refused to discuss the case outside the small circle of scientists who had once been involved. However, the photographs did not remain hidden forever. Over the following decades, rumors about the strange post-mortem images began to spread among collectors of historical photographs and researchers of unexplained phenomena. In 1923, the images resurfaced. They were found by Dr. Victoria Ashford, a pioneering psychiatrist studying the visual effects of psychological trauma. She had come across vague references to the photographs during her research and eventually tracked down Pemberton, now an elderly man. Under strict supervision, he allowed her to examine the images. Dr. Ashford's investigation focused on the psychological reactions of those who viewed the photographs, using more modern analytical methods than those available to Dr. Rutherford. Her results confirmed and expanded the earlier findings. The photographs activated specific areas of the brain related to time perception and recognition of consciousness. Observers often showed measurable neurological changes that lasted long after viewing, including shifts in brainwave patterns, altered sensory perception, and stimulation of brain regions linked to spiritual or transcendental experiences. Even more striking, Dr. Ashford discovered that the effects were cumulative. The more a person viewed the photographs, the stronger the neurological response became. Repeated exposure led some participants to report direct communication with James Morrison, as if the images themselves were a bridge to his lingering consciousness. Her conclusions echoed Rutherford's from decades earlier. The photographs were not lifeless images of a dead child. They acted as an interface between the living and a preserved fragment of James's mind, somehow maintained through his mother's experimental methods. But in 1925, her research ended abruptly. Dr. Ashford suffered what her colleagues called a nervous breakdown. Reports suggested she had become obsessed, spending hours alone with the photographs, taking notes on supposed messages from James. In her final weeks of work, she claimed James was trying to tell her where Helena Morrison had gone, and about further experiments Helena had performed after leaving Boston. Her peers dismissed these claims as delusions. Yet her private notes contained oddly precise information she could not have known through normal means. After her collapse, the Morrison photographs were again locked away. Pemberton's family, who inherited the collection after his death in 1919, decided the images were too dangerous to study further. They sealed them in a bank vault, keeping them away from all future researchers. Over the decades, the photographs became a myth among collectors and paranormal historians. Mentions of them appeared occasionally in obscure academic journals, usually as a mysterious footnote in discussions of Victorian photography. Only a handful of people who had directly seen the images knew the truth, and even among them, most refused to speak about it because of the risks and the controversy. Then, in 1967, James Morrison's photographs were rediscovered yet again, this time by Dr. Robert Chen, a neuroscientist at Columbia University, studying the relationship between consciousness and visual perception. After finding references in old archives, he convinced the Peton family to let him analyze the images using advanced neurological testing equipment. Dr. Chen's experiments confirmed what earlier researchers had only suspected. The photographs consistently triggered the same unique patterns of brain activity in all test subjects, patterns identical to those that appear when a person recognizes another conscious being. Even though the boy in the image was clearly dead, the brain responded as if James Morrison were alive and aware. This was the first objective scientific proof that the photographs contained something beyond ordinary imagery. The human brain, designed by evolution to detect consciousness, was reacting to a real mental presence within the photograph. Dr. Chen wanted to continue and expand the research, but before he could, the Peton family withdrew permission permanently. They were increasingly uncomfortable with the growing attention and fearful of what might be uncovered. The photographs were transferred to a private institution specializing in sensitive historical artifacts, where they have remained inaccessible to the public. Only partial reports from the three major researchers, Rutherford, Ashford, and Chen, are known to exist today. Nearly 140 years after their creation, the Morrison photographs remain one of history's greatest photographic mysteries. The rare combination of a mother's desperation, advanced medical experimentation, and early photographic technology may never be repeated. Yet the implications of what those images reveal continue to echo through fields like neuroscience, consciousness studies, and the philosophy of life and death. If the conclusions of these scientists were even partly correct, the photographs may prove that fragments of human consciousness can survive beyond the body, and that, under certain conditions, science itself can create such survival. The photograph shown at the start of this story, that seemingly simple image of a Victorian child seated calmly in an ornate chair, carries within it decades of investigation, speculation, and unanswered questions about the limits of life itself. James Morrison, frozen forever in his peaceful pose, may not just be a relic of family grief. He may be evidence that humanity's understanding of existence is far from complete. If Helena Morrison truly succeeded in doing what these researchers believed, the implications for human understanding are almost beyond imagination. The photograph remains silent yet hauntingly eloquent, a window into mysteries that may never be solved, and through the passage of centuries, James Morrison still seems to look back at us, holding secrets that challenge everything we think we know about what it means to be alive or dead. This story of mystery and discovery fascinated you, and if you are drawn to the strange places where science touches the unknown, subscribe for more investigations into the world's most haunting and unexplained cases. There is still so much to uncover in the dark space where reason meets mystery, and each revelation brings us closer to truths that could forever change how we understand the human mind and the nature of life itself.